Teachers Visa Pathways to Australia. I'm Johanna Bertumen-Onato. I am a registered migration agent, and I'm also the owner of Bridgeos Migration Consultancy. So what's in store for us today? Let me go to the next slide. So overview, we'll walk you through the key terminologies. So if you're coming here as a teacher, you wanted to know what's our Australian school system. And then since the discussion revolves around the visa coming to Australia, I'll talk about the skills list. Because for permanent residency, you cannot come here if you're not in our skills list. Of course, the teachers are there, but there are just many different kinds of teachers. The qualification requirements, the job description. So there's a specific description per teacher, which I will show you. Average salary of teachers, registration, this is the licensing. Just like in the Philippines, you have the PRC. And skills assessment. Before I start digging through, if you can see, there's a lot of things that I will be discussing. So a disclaimer first, I am not here to give a specific advice. This is about providing general information about how teachers can come to Australia. So the questions that I will be answering are, through this presentation, are what's the school system? How much do teachers earn in Australia? How do you get here? What are your options if you are a teacher? All right. Next, key terminologies. The reason why I'm discussing this is that the way we say things here in Australia is a bit different from the Philippines. School. When we say school in the Philippines, it's really any school. It can be elementary school, it can be high school, it can be college, it can be university, it can be TESDA. That's still school for us. So generically speaking, it's an umbrella term for Filipinos. Now in Australia, school means primary school to secondary school. Okay, just so that you get your terminologies correct. Now, we always say that, oh, nag-college ako. College. So, college here doesn't mean that it's a university. For us, when you talk about university, oh, we went to the uni. Where's your uni? Because they usually shorten words here. So, college is not university in Australia. Another terminology that we usually say as Filipinos is that, oh, I have a diploma. I used to say that I have a diploma in computer engineering. But really, it's a bachelor's degree. Because in the Australian education framework, qualification framework, a diploma level is lower than a bachelor's degree level. So, make sure that the terminologies are correct, because you might be confused when you're talking to people here in Australia, especially when you're enrolling. Australian school system. So, it's compulsory for children aged from 6 to 7 in Victoria that they should be studying. Okay? Students attend school for a total of 13 years. So, yung grade 1 sa Philippines, right? 1 to 12. In here, it's 1 to 13. Primary school, age between 5 to 12 years old. Prep, and years 1 to 6. So, prep, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, secondary school, aged between 12 to 18 years old. That's year 7 to 12. I think it's not much different now in the Philippines because we have upgraded our school system in the Philippines. Because before, it's grades, during my time, it's elementary school 1 to 6, and then after that, your high school. High school is from year 1 to year 4, and then you go to college, which is university here. All right, school types. There's primary schools, as what I've mentioned, secondary schools, we call meron din, we call that P to 9, prep to year 9, or prep to year 12. So they cover from prep, primary school and secondary school. And there can be K to 9, kinder to year 9, K to 12. What does that mean? So if you're a kid, you're studying from prep to year 9 in your school, then that means you have to move from year 10 to 12. Okay? So that's how it works in Australia. All right, so now I'm talking about the occupation list. This is very important because in most of our visas, you have to be part of the list. So particularly speaking, for permanent residency visa, so if you want to migrate here, you want to stay here permanently, you should be on our list. There are three kinds of lists. There's the MLTSSL, Medium to Long-Term Strategic Skills List. That's the best list to be in, because if you're in that list, those roles there are highly in demand in Australia, and you'll have more chances of getting PR, more visa options. So those are the roles. Well, that list is very big, but this is just for teachers because I'm talking about teachers today. So early childhood, that's before pre-primary school. Teacher, secondary school, sorry for the typo there, it should be primary. Teacher of the hearing impaired, teacher of the sight impaired. So yung mga, those people with hearing issues, sight issues, the students, special education teachers, NEC, 8 university lecturer. So what does that mean? So I talked about the roles, and on the right side, there are acronyms that you can see. So AITSL, AITSL, is the skills assessment body for these teachers. Skills assessment body, it is the organization or the company that would decide whether your qualification, meaning your education level and your work experience, is at the same level as what's expected for an early childhood or, for whatever role that you can see here in Australia. So you can see most of it are 8 and there's university lecturer is under VET-assess. Okay, moving on to the next list. It's the STSOL, Short-Term Skilled Occupation List. So I don't have to read through all of it, you can see it. But what you see here, Short-Term Skilled Occupation List, most of the teachers under this are at VET-assess. So again, it's a skills assessing body, it's a skills assessment body as for the other teachers, which is 8 Now, I will go on to the third list. Yeah, so role is regional occupation list. So if you will be working in a regional area, if you'll be working and living there. There's the vocational education teacher, trades. Vocational education teacher, non-trades. So what does that mean? Trade roles can be a carpenter, can be a chef. Non-trades maybe, maybe you're teaching business, you're teaching marketing. And those, it's the same title, but just different fields. TRA is the Trades Recognition Australia. They are the skills assessing body for this role. And then for the other one, non-trades, is VET-assess. Now, what is the qualification requirement? I've shown you so many roles, and we've looked at it all, and most of them, I think all of them, would require at least a bachelor's degree. And I have here enlisted example courses. So if you want to be a primary teacher, primary school teacher, then you should have finished Bachelor of Education. So that's the duration in Australia if you plan to study, like for example, just 18 years old, you're finishing year 12, you wanted to become a teacher, and your parents wanted you to study in Australia, then you can study any of these as bachelor's degree, yeah, because you came from your year 12. So there's early childhood. You can also combine early childhood with primary education. Now, some people are mature. You know, they're over. They're not 18 anymore. They're not just they haven't just finished year 12. Then maybe they'd like to try teaching. They can also go for Master of Teaching Primary Education if they want to go for the primary schools, Master of Special Education. So again, this is just an example of the courses that are available in Australia, but there are still lots. Okay, but there's just so much for me to list. Now, with all these different roles, Australia has a specific list with tasks on it and a description. So the tasks is very long, so I've just put in here the summary of the description. So I'll just read one. Early childhood. Teach the basics of numeracy, literacy, music, art, and literature to early childhood pre-primary students and promote student social, emotional, intellectual, and physical development. All right, so almost the same, but the other one is for primary school students. Secondary, it's most the same as what they're saying there from before, but it's geared towards secondary school students. Now, you can also be a private tutor. You teach students in the practice, theory, and performance of subjects such as art, drama, music in private training establishments. So you're still a teacher. It's just a different nominated occupation that you'll need to go for. All right. Average salary. So we have reports where you can access this. It's usually pay scale or job outlook. So you can look at that and you can see the weekly pay of a teacher here in Australia. So I have here our primary school teachers, private tutors, secondary school at 1,914 per week. Okay, so you multiply that by 4, that's their salary per month. Now, as a teacher, just like in the Philippines, you have to go and get your license at PRC. In Australia, so PRC in the Philippines is nationwide. So one rule for the whole country. For Australia, there are different rules per state. Like I am from Melbourne, that's in Victoria. So the registration body for people who live here in Victoria is the Victorian Institute of Teaching. There's also the Teachers Registration Board of SA or South Australia. For example, you wanted to live in Adelaide, so that's where you need to go. I've just put in the website so that you can check it yourselves because that is not my expertise. My expertise lies on Australian visa legislation and not on your registration, on teacher registration. Okay? There's also WA. So some states might need a registration, some states might not. So you just have to check those out. All right, skills assessment. So the importance of skills assessment. Skills assessment is really the first step in applying for your permanent residency visa in Australia. Why? Because you have to check whether, I have been a teacher, elementary teacher in the Philippines, so will I be considered as a primary school teacher in Australia? The only way to know is to apply for a skills assessment, okay? And skills assessment is a mandatory requirement for the next steps of your permanent residency application, all right? So a bit wordy here, but the summary is that it asks you that you should have at least 4 years of university degree, the one that I've shown you a while ago. You also have to have that initial teacher education qualification. Yeah, so completion of at least 45 days supervised teaching practice with students across age range as below. So I've shown you the different roles and therefore I've put it in here. Early childhood, birth to 8 years of age range, middle school. So 8 cell would specify that. And if you say, I've been a high school teacher, then you have to prove that. You have to show that. Okay? Some of the roles that I've mentioned, their skills assessing body is VET-assess. Now with VET-assess, they would look for your qualification. Did you have a bachelor's of education degree in your field? And they would also want to see at least 12 months of work experience. For VET-assess, the experience can be part-time. 20 hours a week can be considered. Now, the other ones, the vocational teachers that I've shown under role, regional occupation list, is via the TRA, Trades Recognition Australia. It asks for a qualification, so whatever that qualification requirement, so it might be a bachelor's degree, and plus 3 years of work experience full-time. So they want you to have finished your bachelor's degree first before they would count the 3 years. And it should be full-time. If you're working part-time, it would be like say 20 hours a week, then that's just half. So that means you'll need 6 years of part-time. All right, so RPL, recognition of prior learning, can also happen with TRA, meaning you didn't have the qualification, but you have been working as a teacher. I think in most cases it's a bit difficult to do that because before you work, they will look for your qualification. Well, if it's an RPL, it's coming from your work experience, they would expect another 3 years of work experience full-time. All right, or 6 years of work experience with RPL combined, full-time. Right, so as I've mentioned, this is a mouthful. There's a lot to cover. All of this is in my mind, but of course, this is really just making yourselves familiar with the terms and the process. Okay, so this is my favorite part because that's my expertise. Visa options. PR means permanent residency. This is for people who want to live here forever. Okay, permanent residency visa, you should have at least 65 migration points. All right, so actually the first requirement is that you should be in the list, but we have established that you're a teacher, you're in the list based on the roles that I have shown you a while ago. You should have migration points, so it's based on your age. I have another video about that for PR visas in Australia. It's very generic, but it tells you about the migration points and how you get it. You should have a skills assessment, as I've discussed, the different assessing bodies. There's TRA, VET-assess, and 8-cell. Registration may be required. Well, most teachers do require registration. Should have the required qualification. English language requirement. So for teachers, it's a bit high. It's 8.0 in 2 of the bands. But what I usually tell my clients is that make sure that you get 8.0 in IELTS, academic IELTS in all bands so that it's safer. But it can be hard to get that. Character requirement, these are like your police clearances. Satisfy all the PR visa criteria because there are different permanent residency visas and they have requirements. So these are the different ones. The 189 visa, skilled independent, for roles on MLTSSL only. So if you're a primary school teacher, in the list, if we can get back to that, then if it's in MLTSSL, then you might be eligible for 189. There's the 190 visa. 190 visa, the role can be MLTSSL or it can be STSOL. And there's the skilled work regional provisional 491. So this is if you plan to work and live in a designated regional area. Okay, 189 and 190 are full permanent residency visas, while 491 is just a provisional PR visa. Employer-sponsored visa, so there are different kinds as well. So this is, as the name tells you, you are sponsored by an employer. An employer is hiring you to work as a teacher in Australia. Now, just a note, employer-sponsored visa, these kinds of visas are not easy to get, especially that the universities or the schools are usually publicly owned, and roles in Australia, if it's the government, they prefer to get Australian citizens or permanent residents. Okay, so there's the TSS 482 visa, that's the work visa, ENS 186 direct entry, ENS transition stream. These are permanent residency visas, and SESR 494, again, if you're living in the regional area. So again, I'm just giving you codes, but it will make sense to you when, after looking at this basic information, you feel like you're eligible, you feel like you want to know more about it, then that's when we would recommend to book a consultation with me, because that would be one-on-one with me. Note that is we do charge for that, and that's not for free. We charge at $150 for a 40-minute session, and that is when you're overseas. But when you're in Australia, it's $165 because we add in the GST, which is our VAT 10% tax. Okay, the direct entry, you should have at least 3 years of full-time work experience. Again, the counting of work experience is from when you've completed your qualification. Skills assessment is required, English language requirement, character, registration. You should have a sponsor. Sponsor is an employer. TSS 482 is a temporary visa, 24 months. Full-time work experience. So you should have at least 2 years work experience in the last 5 years for TSS. The other one, 2 to 3 years anytime after you finish your qualification. But with TSS, it should be in the last 5 years. English language, character requirement. So it's usually the same. Transition stream. When we say transition, you came from one stage to another. So the people who are in TSS 482 visa and their role is on medium to long-term skills list, they are able to move to ENS transition stream currently with the current law. But there was an announcement made by the department just a month ago saying that people on the short-term list can also go for the PR visa ENS 186, but the legislation is not out yet. But that's really good news. SESR 494, again, another employer-sponsored visa, but that's for the regional area. Okay? Now, if you realize that, really, I don't have that qualification, I don't have the work experience, then you might need to still study in Australia. And if you go for a student visa, say you'd like to go for a master's in Masters of Education, secondary school, for example, then you would have to apply for a student visa. Okay, so the requirements for a student visa, you should satisfy the genuine temporary entrant criteria. It means that, you don't have intentions to stay in Australia permanently, you just want to study here. And you have to show that you have ties in the Philippines or from your country of origin. There's the English language capability requirement, master's degree, bachelor's degree. If it's a teaching course, might be 7.0 at least in IELTS, depending on the university. Financial capacity, in the application form, it asks, how can you support yourself? And there's a calculation for this. I have a video about student visas, studying in Australia. I have detailed all of those there. Again, character requirements. On a student visa, you can work 20 hours a week. Currently, because of the pandemic, all international students can work full-time because we are struggling to get workers here in Australia. But that can stop anytime. Without the pandemic, it's really just 20 hours a week. But if you're taking a master's degree, research, and higher, PhD, then you can work full-time. If you're taking up a master's degree coursework, you can only work 20 hours a week when your class is in session. If you're on a university break, then you can work full-time. If you bring your partner or your husband or spouse here in Australia as a dependent of your visa, then he or she can work full-time. Okay? And for a master's degree, bachelor's degree, if you studied at least 2 years here in Australia, you will be eligible for a graduate visa. So again, it's another visa that lets you stay and work in Australia for 2 to 3 years. That's after you've completed your course. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Just remember, you can still access this. Don't forget to go to Bridgeos TV because I have so much more videos there that you might be needing. But this one is specially made for teachers. If you want a thorough discussion of your visa options in Australia, book in a consultation with our registered migration agents at www.bridgeos.com.au.